The story of the Prophet Yusuf Alaihissalam. Yusuf Alaihissalam dreamed. One night when Yusuf was a child, he had an extraordinary dream. He dreamed that he saw 11 stars, the sun and the moon bowing down to him. When he woke up, he immediately went to his father. The Prophet Yusuf Alaihissalam told him about his dream. His father immediately understood his takwil, and that something big would happen to his son. So his father immediately warned Yusuf not to tell his dream to his brothers, who would later damage their relationship and have hatred for him for God's gift. Yusuf also suggested repayment of his father. Yusuf's brothers had bad intentions to Yusuf. The Prophet Yusuf Alaihissalam loved Yusuf so much that his brothers were jealous of him. They also gathered to make a plot against him so that Joseph was kept away from his father and that affection turned to them. One of them suggested killing Yusuf or throwing him away so that his father's attention would only be shed on them. After that they visited Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But some of them refused Joseph's funeral. He only asked that Yusuf was put in a well far away so that a passing caravan would find him. Then they took him and sold him. It turned out that this suggestion was seen as good and accepted by them. The Prophet Yusuf said, "Indeed, your departure with Yusuf makes me very sad, and I am worried that he might eat a wolf, while you are unaware of him." They replied, "If he is really eaten by wolves, while we are a strong group, then we are actually the ones who are the losers." Quran Surah Yusuf, 11-14. Joseph put in the well. So in the morning, they went out to take Joseph to the desert while tending their goats. After they were away from their father, they started carrying out the plan. They walked until they arrived at the well, then they took off Yusuf's clothes and threw Yusuf into it. At that time, Allah revealed to Yusuf, "Surely you will tell them what they have done, while they do not remember anymore." Quran Surah Yusuf, 15. After they succeeded in getting Yusuf into the well, they slaughtered a goat and then smeared the blood on Yusuf's clothes. At night, they came home to see their father pretending to cry. Prophet Yusuf saw them. Yusuf's brothers said that Yusuf was eaten by a wolf. Next they took out their blood-stained robes to corroborate their statement. But the Prophet Yusuf saw that his robe was not torn, because they forgot to tear it. Then Yusuf said to them, "This wolf is really strange. Why does it love Yusuf? He eats it without tearing his clothes." So Yusuf said to them, explaining their lies, "Actually it is you who see the good, bad actions, then good patience, that is, my patience. And Allah alone is asked for his help with what you tell." Quran Surah Yusuf, 18. Joseph is taken out of the well and taken to Egypt. As for Joseph, he remained in the well waiting for someone to help him. When he was in this condition, suddenly a caravan came to Egypt, and they wanted to add to their supplies. Then they sent one of them to the well to bring water. When he lowered his bucket, Yusuf depended on him. Then the man looked into the well. He saw a handsome young man holding on to him. This man was also pleased and told his other friends. Then they took Joseph out and took him with them to Egypt to be sold. One day, Al-Aziz was going around the market to buy a child for himself, because he had no children. Then the caravan offered Yusuf to him. Then the king of Al-Aziz bought it for a few dirhams. Then Al-Aziz returned to his wife in a happy state because he bought a child. He also ordered his wife to glorify the child and be kind to him. Maybe he could be of use to both of them or be used as an adopted child. Thus Allah gave power to Yusuf on earth so that he lived under Al-Aziz's affection and management. Al-Aziz's wife seduces Yusuf. Time passed and Yusuf grew older. He grew up as a strong and very handsome young man. Al-Aziz's wife always paid attention to Yusuf every day and was attracted to him. He began to show his love through hints and insinuations, but Yusuf turned away from him and did not care about him, so this woman began to think about how to seduce Yusuf. One day, when her husband left the palace, his wife took advantage of the opportunity. She decorated and wore beautiful clothes, locked the door of her house and invited Yusuf to enter her room and asked her to do abominable acts with him. But the Prophet Yusuf Alaihissalam, with his iffah, self-care, and holy nature refused his invitation. He said, "I take refuge in Allah. Indeed my master has treated me well." Verily, the wrongdoers will not prosper. Quran Surah Yusuf, 23. Then Yusuf immediately went to the door to get out of that place. But Al-Aziz's wife did not waste the opportunity. She immediately grabbed Yusuf from behind to block him from leaving and held his robe until it was torn. Suddenly, her husband, namely Al-Aziz, the Egyptian minister, came home. The atmosphere was even more critical. Al-Aziz's wife immediately escaped from the critical situation in front of her husband and accused Yusuf of being a traitor and trying to wrong him. She also said to her husband, "What is the revenge for those who intend to commit adultery with your wife, other than imprisonment or punished with a painful punishment?" Quran Surah Yusuf, 25. Against this accusation the Prophet Yusuf immediately defended himself and said, "It was he who seduced me." So her husband asked one of his family for a settlement, and the family member said without hesitation, "Look, if her robe is torn at the front, then the woman is truthful and Joseph is one of the liars." Quran Surah Yusuf, 26-27. Then her husband turned to his wife and said to her, "Indeed, the incident was among your deceptions, indeed your deceptions are great." Quran Surah Yusuf, 28. Then Al-Aziz asked Yusuf to leave this matter alone and not talk about it in front of anyone. Then her husband asked his wife to ask Allah for forgiveness for her sins and mistakes. Even though the Egyptians worship statues, they know that the only one who can forgive and torture is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Therefore Al-Aziz ordered his wife to ask forgiveness from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Gathering of Egyptian women at the invitation of Al-Aziz's wife. All parties agreed to hide this matter. However, it turned out that the news of Al-Aziz's wife seducing Yusuf had spread in the palace, and the women of the city had also talked about it, namely that Al-Aziz's wife seduced his servant, namely Yusuf. Al-Aziz's wife also knew about this situation, so that she was angry and wanted to show the reasons for her actions to the women who were talking about her, and that Yusuf's good looks made her do this. So Al-Aziz's wife invited the women to her and she had prepared for them a special place. She had also given each of them a knife and fruit. Then Al-Aziz's wife sent Yusuf out. Joseph went out to obey his master's orders, so when the women saw him, they were all amazed by his good looks and unknowingly they injured their hands with knives, to the point that they all thought that Joseph was an angel. Al-Aziz's wife also said, "That is the person you reproached me for," attracted to him, and indeed I have tempted him to submit himself to me, but he refused. And indeed, if he does not obey what I command him, surely he will be imprisoned and he will be among the despicable people. Quran Surah Yusuf, 32. Joseph chooses in prison. So the women also accepted Al-Aziz's wife's excuse, and when Yusuf saw such a situation, he prayed, "O my Lord, prison is more to my liking than fulfilling their invitation to me. And if you do not prevent me from their deceit, I will certainly be inclined to fulfill their wishes, and I will certainly be among the fools." Quran Surah Yusuf, 33. There was almost a slander in Medina because of the love of women for Yusuf, so the authorities saw that Yusuf needed to be imprisoned until a certain time. They also imprisoned Joseph and Joseph remained in prison for some time, and it turned out that there were also two people who entered prison with him, one as a baker, while the other was the king's drinker. The two of them saw the noble character of the prophet Joseph and the worship he performed were admirable, so that both of them came to Yusuf and told his second dream to Yusuf as mentioned by Allah in his book. Said one of them, "I had a dream that I was pressing grapes." And another said, "Behold, I dreamed that I was carrying bread on my head, some of which the birds ate. Give us the taqwinya. Indeed, we see that you are among those who are good at interpreting dreams." Quran Surah Yusuf, 36. So the Prophet Yusuf interpreted the dreams of the two of them, but before that the Prophet Yusuf invited them to believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, worship him and not associate him with anything. Next, he interpreted the dream of the two of them, that one of them would come out of prison and return to work as before giving water to the king, while the other one would be crucified and a bird would eat his head. Before the drinker was released from prison, Prophet Yusuf asked him to convey his problem to the king, that he was innocent and that he was imprisoned unjustly, so that he would be forgiven and released from prison. But Satan made the king's drinker forget not to mention Yusuf's problem to the king, so Joseph remained in prison for several years. So time passed, and what happened to the two of them was Takwik and Yusuf. King of Dreams. One day the king slept and dreamed that he saw 7 fat cows being eaten by 7 thin cows, and 7 green grains, wheat, and 7 other dry ones. So the king immediately woke up from his sleep in a state of shock. He immediately gathered his leaders and told his dream and asked them to interpret the dream. But they all could not. They also tried to turn the king away from the dream so as not to be alarmed by him, saying, "Those are empty dreams and we never know how to interpret them." Quran Surah Yusuf, 44. Even so, the king was still worried about his dream and kept trying to find out the meaning of his dream, until finally the king's drinker remembered the Prophet Yusuf and asked the king to enter the prison to meet Yusuf. It was when he asked the Prophet Yusuf to interpret the king's dream, so Yusuf interpreted it, that the fat cow and the 7 years are 7 years in which that year was full of goodness and blessings. The Prophet Yusuf Alaihissalam not only interpreted the dream, but offered the best way for them to deal with it, namely that they should save their crops for facing the dry years by leaving them in the stalks except for a little to eat until Allah will open a field. When the king's drinker knew his interpretation, he immediately returned to the king and reported what Yusuf had said to him, so the king was very happy. Then the king asked about the person who interpreted his dream, so the king's drinker told him, namely Yusuf. Hearing the answer, the king immediately asked Joseph to be brought before him. Then the king's messenger immediately met Joseph and told Joseph to follow the king's invitation to meet him, but Joseph refused to meet him until it was clear that he was clean and that he was innocent, so that the king would know about what happened to the women in the city. Joseph's exit from prison and become an Egyptian official. So the king sent messengers to meet Al-Aziz's wife and other women and asked them about Yusuf's problem. They also admitted their mistakes and expressed their repentance. They said, "Glory be to Allah, we do not know anything bad from him." Al-Aziz's wife also explained Yusuf's cleanliness before humans. Joseph meets his brothers. It was then, the king issued Joseph's clean decree from the accusations directed at him and ordered Joseph to be released from prison. He also glorified Joseph and drew closer to him. Then the king gave him the choice to choose the position he wanted, so Yusuf said, "Make me treasurer land of Egypt. Indeed, I am a person who is good at guarding and knowledgeable." Quran Surah Yusuf, 55. The king also agreed to Joseph's request because of his trust and knowledge. Furthermore, what the king dreamed of came true one by one. In the midst of distributing staple food ingredients that Joseph did to the people, Joseph suddenly met people he recognized, both their language, physique, and names. These people came suddenly without being noticed, and it turned out that they were his brothers, his father's children, Prophet Yaqub Alaihissalam. Joseph recognized them, but they no longer recognized him. They were the ones who threw Yusuf into the well when he was a child, but now they came because they needed food. Joseph also did good to them, and they also treated him well. Then Yusuf asked about their condition and their number. Then they told him that there were 12 of them. One of them left, and there was still a sibling who was with his father because his father loved him and had a hard time letting him go. After Yusuf prepared food for them, where each of them received the size of a camel's load, Yusuf said, "Bring me your brother who is in the same fatherland as you, Bunyamin. Don't you see that I perfect the measure and I am the best host? If you don't bring it to me, then you won't get another measure from me, and don't come near me." Quran Surah Yusuf, 59-60. Yusuf's brothers said, "We will persuade his father to bring him here, and indeed we will actually carry it out." Then Joseph ordered his servants to put the goods, their exchanges, into their sacks, so that they would know when they returned to their families, namely that they returned the goods to Egypt, or because Joseph was afraid that they would not get them later. Something to swap again. This was what Joseph did so that they would be willing to return to him. Then Yusuf's brothers went home to meet their father, saying, "Oh, our father, we will not get another measure of wheat, If we don't bring our brother, so let our brother go with us so we can get